Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of RecruitMilitary Live, a series of recurring live broadcasts covering all things military transition, veteran employment, mil-spouse employment, and much, much more. My name is Lucas Connolly, retired U.S. Army officer and former TAP program manager, here to help you navigate the turbulent waters of transitioning from military service to a civilian career. If you're in search of meaningful employment after service in the military, well, you're in the right place. Please visit rmvets.com/live to learn more. Okay, let's roll into today's show. Army doctrine defines leadership as the act of influencing people to achieve a mission and improve an organization by providing purpose, direction, and motivation. And the other sister services have very similar definitions with a few words adjusted here and there. Military leaders tend to exercise influence because they're, among other things, invested with the authority to enforce compliance, even where commitment may not exist. Leaving the military and beginning a civilian career often means leaving behind much, if not all, of the positional authority you may have had. How then can we learn to lead, manage, and influence people absent from the near omnipotence of military authority? Well, I'm here to tell you that there is more than one way to skin a cat, and there is more than one way to exercise influence. Our guest today has formulated 10 rules of influence, and today we will begin by unpacking just a few. Today's guest is an executive coach, personal branding consultant, and reputation management expert. Before starting her own business, she spent 20 years in marketing, public relations, and business development. She's an award-winning author and an in-demand speaker. She's had a TEDx talk, 5 best-selling books, numerous courses on LinkedIn Learning, showing all which showcase her empowering style. In the military community, she's dedicated countless hours of her own time to help veterans create their own personal brands, understand the importance of reputation, and now learn the new rules of influence as they build meaningful civilian careers. In addition to her professional pursuits, she's made it a personal mission to serve those like us who have served. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Lida Citroën. Lida, welcome back to the show. It's been a while.
Hi, it has been a while, and I hope we're not skinning cats. You really had me with that.
No, well, where was that supposed to be? Cleveland? I don't know. They're eating the cats. They're eating the dogs.
I don't know.
I hear madness on television. I don't know what to believe. All right, folks, now that we know you know who we are, we would love to hear who you are. Hit us up with a message in that chat window. Let us know where you're watching from, who you are, who you've served with, what your status is. Are you active duty military, National Guard, Reserve, separated, retired, caretaker, or caregiver, or some other status that we haven't thought of? We would love to hear from you. And if you've got questions, comments, issues, concerns, or a little good, healthy inter-service rivalry, please feel free to jump into the chat. Given time, we will address your questions in the show. All right, we are wheels up. Now, Lida, if I were to get 1,000 leaders, managers, CEOs, colonels, generals, executives in a room and ask them to describe the dynamics of leadership and management and influence, we would probably get 1,000 different opinions, 1,000 different philosophies, and they would all in part be valid and yet distinct. Can you talk to us for a minute about how we define influence and why it is so important in the modern civilian workplace?
Absolutely. And thank you again for having me. I don't know if this is our second or third conversation, but it's always a treat. Third, to be with you and RecruitMilitary and all the brave men and women who are watching. If you've served in the military or you're a military spouse or a child of a veteran, thank you for your family's service. Thank you for your service and for my freedom. Want to make sure I say that first. Influence plays very different in the civilian sector. And where I come into the conversation is, I teach a lot of military transition. So somebody who has either grown up in the military culture and is now looking to what's next when they separate, or someone who has been in for 4 or 5 years and wants to, bail and get back out, which both options are right, depending on where you are. The understanding that the culture is going to be different, rank, seniority, authority, they don't play the same way. And they don't play the same way anymore in the civilian world. So I think there was a time when it probably was closer together, where you could come out of the military and find sort of that community where pedigree and credentials and and job title gave you the clout that you may have felt in the military. But what we're seeing, I mean, as a civilian, what I'm seeing is a lot of that stuff's gone. And I don't know if it was, social media or divorce rate or rising hemlines. I mean, who the heck knows what changed it? But it is changed. And influence, the way I define it, is really the ability to affect the outcome of a decision or an action. So I want to know that if I, advocate for a community or I advocate for a position in my company, that I'm taken seriously. I want to know if I have a vision that I want to carry forward. I see a new opportunity or I see an obstacle that needs to be avoided. I want to know that people are going to listen to me and hear me and take action. That's having influence. And sure, the high levels in a company are going to yield more, perhaps, as you said, positional authority, but they don't necessarily have the influence. And that's what I really try to unpack in the book. I want everyone's voice to be heard. If there was a mission of mine, it's that everybody everywhere can feel that they matter, their voice matters, and what they have to say is important. We need to start hearing from them.
Absolutely. And I concur. Some things have changed out there. I don't know what it is. When I was a young man, if my boss told me to do something, it was, even a civilian job. Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yes, sir. Moving. How fast? How far? Coming back to the civilian workforce, I would tell somebody on the team, hey, I need this done. They'd be like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm like, what is going on? Has the whole world gone crazy? So in the military, I was an Army officer for a little while. I had authority. Vested in me by my oath, by my position, by the President of the United States, by Congress, and from the Uniform Code of Military Justice. There was a lot of authority. I could take people's ranks. I could take their freedom away. I could restrict their movements. I could promote them. I could give them time off. I could send them to a school or not send them to a school. There was a lot as a commander that you can do or not do. But what you're telling me now is that I can go into the civilian sector without any of that ironclad authority that I used to have and continue to influence and manage teams just as I did before. I mean, I can't, enforce. I don't have the power. So how am I influencing their behavior?
Well, I think there's a little bit of a difference here, right? So there's command and control, there's coercion, and there's compliance. If your paycheck depends on it, you will do what I say. That's not influence. Influence is, I have an idea. I have a vision. I see a way we can do something. Do you want to get on board and join me in making that happen? It's nuanced, but you don't just walk in the door and have influence. That's why I laid out the 10 rules, because they kind of form steps, right? You have to have credibility. You have to have visibility. You have to have a service mindset. There's all these things that have to be in place. And then when you raise your hand in a meeting and say, yeah, something's not passing the smell test, or I think we can do this differently, people will take you seriously. So it isn't a matter of walking through the door with it, because it's not something you wear like a uniform or a badge. It's something you build and you internalize, and then other people experience it and join you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you say you wear it like a uniform or a badge, because many years ago, our military branch, artillery, infantry, signal, communications, intelligence, what have you, we used to literally wear it as an insignia on our collar. That uniform has gone away since then. But you could walk into a room and just kind of look around. It's like, hey, I need to get some information about this fire support plan. You just go, where's the guy with the cannons on his collar? Hey, I need to know some information about the ISR plan, the intel gathering. Where's the guy with that funny intel? There he is, right over there. So yeah, you can't wear even your experience on your collar or even your rank when you get to that civilian sector. Okay, so we got 10 rules. We don't have time for all 10. But you've put together this awesome list of 10 rules. I wish we had time to do them all. We're just going to call out a handful today. So let's pull a few from the list here that I think are most relevant to the audience. Rule number 2, be real and let others see the true you. I think that's a little bit of a departure from the norm for military leaders who don't even use each other's first names, who might not even know each other's first names. Can you help us understand why this is important?
Well, in rule 2, be real. was a little bit of a struggle for me because I was tempted to use the word be authentic, right? We talked about authenticity. We talk about being authentic. And I think we all understand the word, but I don't know that we know how to do the word, right? If I said to you, Lucas, be authentic with me, you'd be like, I thought I was. But if I said to you, let's get real here, it kind of implies like let's get behind the curtain. Let's really figure out what's happening. Let's speak, person to person here. And that's what I'm talking about in that rule is we need to start relating to people, put the scripts down, put the formality down. We're human beings. At the end of the day, people buy from people. Companies don't buy from companies because a building isn't negotiating with a building. It's the people inside the building that are forming connections and creating influence. So the point of that rule is just let people see you. And that is a huge shift when I teach that in the military community. Because as you said, it's like, well, what do you mean? I make myself vulnerable if I do that. They might think I'm weak. They may think I don't know or I don't understand. And my point is, yes. Yes, they may. And this fear that we have of being judged, of being evaluated, if I offer an idea and it's not a good idea, am I going to get laughed at? Every human being feels that. You are not alone if that's something that's holding you back. The difference is people who have influence work through that, right? We didn't talk about it, but the first rule is to have courage. And you have to work through fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. I don't have to tell your audience about courage. But being real means you're brave enough. You're taking the risk to say, I'm going to let you see me. In the book, I share, as you know, a lot about myself. And I shared some stories that, I even pulled my husband aside and I'm like, do I go that far? And he goes, I kind of think you have to. Like, oh my gosh. But if I'm asking my reader to be real, I've got to be real. And it's scary. Absolutely it is. But it's the only way people really feel like they know us. And so being real is vital.
So I had a commander once who admonished me not to get too familiar with my soldiers. He said, you always need to maintain a professional distance between yourself and your soldiers. Familiarity breeds contempt. I'd never heard that phrase before. What would you say? What would you say to that?
So one of the distinctions I draw, and if anybody listening has followed me, you know that I talk a lot about this. I think there's a big difference between being authentic, being real, and being transparent. When asked a question, if we give our opinion, if we give our view, if we comment online, we should speak a truth, the truth as we believe it, right? I am passionate about this. I'm not making it up. I'm not trying to jump on a trend. I'm not trying to be part of a conversation because I don't want to be left out. It should be truth as I see it, right? I am passionate about this. I believe strongly about this. I disagree with this. It should be authentic and real. But I don't believe we have to tell people everything. I really don't. I think, and teach your kids this. If you've got kids on social media, really, we don't have to tell people everything about us. If you're staying too far in the protect mode, right? Don't let people know you, don't build relationships. People don't leave companies because of process. They leave because of leaders, and the leaders who let us see them are the leaders we follow. So navigating that line between I'm going to be real and authentic, but no, you don't get to know every detail, every background story, every trauma that I've endured. It's nobody's business, and it doesn't affect who I am today. I think we're allowed to do that, and I advocate for that.
Yeah, and there's a line somewhere, and that line may be different for each of us, where we feel we need to draw it.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Rule number 3. I like this one here, but I'm struggling with it. Rule number 3, be credible to authentically build trust. And I buy that. But isn't that a bit of a challenge when you leave the military and you show up to a company and you're literally the new guy and you have almost no credibility? How do we get from the new guy to influence?
And that's not a military situation, right? That's anybody who's going from one company or one industry to another. True. You're starting over, right? And if you change the way you think about credibility, right? Credibility isn't a certificate. It isn't something you hang on the wall. It's how you are around people, and how you are around people over time helps them determine, do I see you as credible? Do I trust you? Or am I still skeptical? And the formula for credibility is values plus action equals credibility. So day one on the job, no, you're not going to be able to do that. But over time, absolutely. And so let's unpack that for a moment, because this gets sticky when I teach this in the military space, right? The first part of that is values. If I were to ask everybody listening, what are your values? I would hear most likely honor, duty, courage, service, right? Military values. It makes perfect sense that your personal values would line up with the calling that you raised your hand to serve. But I'm asking you to think about them as an individual, as a person. What are your values? And the word might look different. The context might look different. The principle might be different, but they're your values. They're what you use to make go, no-go decisions, right? That's good, that's bad, that's right, that's wrong. Your values live in there. And this is difficult for folks, especially active duty, because you're focused on other things, right? You're not thinking about, what do I believe is, how I operate? But it's important as you think about the next chapter, because your values have to get communicated, and then they have to get acted on. So the second part of the formula is action. I need to see you living those values in order to give you credibility. Here's an example. 2 of my values that I pivot a lot around are gratitude and generosity. It's actually the title of the TED Talk that I did on my work with the military. Gratitude and generosity are what made me lean in 15 years ago to wanting to serve those who had served that I had no connection or understanding around. Because I knew that I wanted to say thank you, and I knew I wanted to give. So the 2 values anchored me into this calling, this purpose. But that isn't enough to give me credibility. If I just felt it and believed it, but I didn't do anything with it, I don't get trust. People don't see me as credible for doing this for the reasons I say I'm doing this. I have to tell people why. And that's the icky part. That's the part that feels uncomfortable to most people listening. I have to say to an audience, to a mentee that I'm coaching, to a reader of one of my military books, I am doing this because I am passionate about saying thank you for my freedom as an American, and you and your family served so that I can live this way. I have to connect the 2. And it doesn't feel great the first couple times, but over time, there's no confusion about why I serve the military. I have full credibility with all the audiences that I serve because I've connected those 2. And
that's interesting.
It's not something you get done in a weekend. It's not something that happens the first day on a job.
I like the way you've connected the values to the actions, because I've heard this said before, I'm having a hard time hearing what you're saying because I'm too busy watching what you're doing, Mm-hmm. And so, and I've had bosses, I've had commanders such that, they say, hey, spending time with your family is very important, but then they're in the office 80 hours a week. Or they want you to stay late on Friday. Or they want you to come in on Sunday. Or they want you to come in on Saturday. They want you to be there at 4:00 in the morning and stay until 9:00 at night. Mm-hmm. Well, do we really believe spending time with our family is important, or do we just say that?
Right.
Okay. So the next one, I like this one. Rule number 4, be of service to have a lasting impact. Is this connected with what they call servant leadership these days?
I think it does. I think where I try to sort of divert it is service is a mindset, right? I want to serve because I want to give. I want to be generous. I want to help others. And what I love about that chapter in the book is you don't just have to serve those of which right? So when I talk to a veteran or somebody who's getting ready to separate or leave the military, they'll say, well, I still want to serve. It doesn't leave when I take the uniform off, but I'm not really that passionate about serving the military community. I really want a break from it. it's okay. You can serve a community, a person that isn't what you know. Take me, for example, right? I'm serving the military and I have no military background myself. I've written 3 books. I've been on national, international stages because of my passion to serve. And I think when you want to serve a community that's different from you, then you have to really understand them. So I made the mistake when I started working in the military. I was given an opportunity through General Peter Pace to teach a program in Philadelphia. And it was to teach service-disabled veterans how to compete for jobs in the financial sector. And these were elite military. And I walked in there thinking, it's just like any corporate group. So yeah, I'll teach this course. It'll feel good. I'm not being paid, but that's not why I'm here. And I realized very quickly I needed to learn a heck of a lot more before I could even do that. So I spent months. I'm still learning 15 years later how the military works, what the needs are. And I think that's where a lot of opportunity under the service mindset umbrella comes from. You can serve a community that's different from you. The first thing to ask yourself is, am I the right person to serve in this way? No one else was talking about personal branding. No one was teaching what I was getting paid a lot of money to teach in the civilian sector. So I thought, yeah, I'm the right person, but I didn't know them. So if you are the right person, spend the time, ask the questions, listen without judgment. Don't listen to form conclusions. Listen to understand. Adopt that growth mindset. You're going to find so much more unfold than you ever could have imagined, but you have to be in the right place. I have a client who does not come from the community she serves. She is working with migrant women who are trying to survive in this country. That's not where she comes from. But she spent the time, she got down on the ground with them and worked with them and asked and listened and asked more. And now she knows so much that she is able to help them. That is a service mindset. And so does it form servant leadership? Sure, if you want to lead, but not everybody wants to lead. Some people just want to contribute and add and advocate and be part of and have influence. It doesn't mean you have to be in the leadership role. So that's why I define it more as a mindset.
Absolutely. And I love the piece about communicating with people, because I think many of us, not myself personally, but many folks in the world are walking around with a solution looking for a problem, when really they should be identifying what the problems are, understanding them, scoping them, validating them, and then looking to be of service with some kind of a solution.
I love that. Yeah.
All right, let's move to rule number 7. We're skipping 5 and 6. They didn't make the cut. We're going straight to number 7. Rule number 7, be agile and grow. I guess my question on rule number 7 is how? I mean, is my future employer going to be sending me to a school where I can learn some new skills? I mean, how does this happen?
I think our military friends that are listening probably have this skill. They're just not using it in this way, right? Because you can plan, you can prepare, you can strategize, you can have everything drawn out. And then the second you hit the ground, everything changes, right? The landscape changes, the conditions change, and you've got to figure out what's next.
The plan never survives first contact.
Exactly. So in the civilian world, it's a different idea. So I think for the military folks listening, they're probably going, yeah, of course. My civilian friends are like, well, what do you mean? And I think what I'm trying to say in that chapter is, again, it's an attitude, right? Am I going to be stuck every time things look different? Every time an obstacle is presented, am I going to go around it? Am I going to go through it, over it? Or am I just going to stop and wait for someone to move it? The world isn't going to move those obstacles, right? If you remember where you were in March of 2020, when we were told that this thing was coming that was going to change our lives, a lot of people stopped and they were paralyzed. They didn't understand. We all didn't understand. But then there were people who said, okay, this is different. What can I do with this, right? How can I look at my career differently? How can I look at my work differently? How can I look at my future differently? And they found solutions. Some were short-term solutions. Some are grand pivots into different, paths. But having a mindset to say, I'm going to be agile, flexible, fluid through everything that comes at me. It goes back to what we were talking about with service. What if you really get on the ground and you start listening to people who you want to serve, and you find out you thought your mission was this, but actually it's over here. This is where the opportunity is. If you're rigid and just thinking, no, that's what I wrote a business plan for, it may not work. But if you're fluid and agile, you're going to see those opportunities, lean into a growth mindset again, and say, all right, let's look at this over here. I remember when I started my business, I talked to a whole bunch of people about how to start a business. I had been very successful in my corporate career, but the one thing I'd never done is start a company in a space that wasn't known, right? Nobody knew what personal branding was 16 years ago. And how was I going to do that? I didn't know. My DNA was the first thing I do is I write a business plan. And I was given all this advice to say, don't put it on paper. Because if you put it on paper, you're going to manage and direct towards that. And that was the best advice I could have been given, because my business has flourished in ways I never would have anticipated 16 years ago. And I think about that with career search, right? And I know you're in that business of helping people find their next path. Sometimes just the direction is good. If you have a company and a job title and a pay scale that you need to align with, and you're holding on to that, with a death grip, you're going to miss some things that might be even better that are off to the side. And so an agile mindset is saying, I'm open. Doesn't mean I'm going to be changing my mind. It doesn't mean you can convince me otherwise, but I'm not afraid to have those conversations. I'm not afraid to explore other possibilities and see what else is there. It might make me more steadfast and committed to what I'm pursuing, but it doesn't scare me. And I think that's something we need today. People are scared of the wrong thing. You shouldn't be scared that there could be a better idea or it could be different. You should be scared that you're doing it the same way because that's the only way that feels comfortable.
Sometimes you can't ask yourself, why should we do it differently? Sometimes you have to ask, well, why are we still doing it the same way we've always done it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there's a measure of being deliberate there. When I talk with transitioning service members or veterans, and they say, well, I'm just trying to find a job. And I say, finding a job is not like finding a quarter on the sidewalk. One is an accident and one is a deliberate action. Don't get them confused. You're not going to stumble over success on your way to the bathroom in the morning. You got to get out there and go find it, seek it, hunt it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big believer of that. And this is a big shift for folks that have spent a lot of their adult life and career in the military. I mean, and I appreciate that, because I think about when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, which a lot of your listeners, they got into the military at those ages. I mean, I was so impressionable, and to be in a culture like the military from that early of an age for 20 years, 15 years, you're becoming an adult in that culture. So reprogramming that, if you will, to say, okay, now you're going to think differently, right? You're going to be agile and you're going to have credibility and talk about your feelings and your values. They look at me like I've got 3 heads. Like, you've got to be kidding me. But it's okay. It's okay. You will get there. It just is a process, right? As best as I do, transition is not a day. It's not the day you retire or you exit. That's not your transition. Transition is a process that can take years. And embracing it gives you that agility, that fluidity and flexibility to adapt.
And I firmly believe it's and if this could be a whole nother show, is just the cyclical nature of it, transitioning from the military to the civilian sector, from one field to another, from one job to another, to one stage in your life to another. We could write a book on that. All right. As we come to the bottom of the hour, we slide right into my favorite question, my last question of each show. Lida, if you had just 30 seconds in an elevator with a transitioning service member, a veteran, maybe a mil spouse, you wanted to give them just one piece of advice about exercising influence, what would that be?
Well, first of all, I would point them to my book, The New Rules of Influence, and I would encourage them to take the time that it is necessary to figure out who they are. If anybody deserves that power, that insight, it is someone who has raised their hand to serve their country. Find out who you are. You have been who the military needed you to be, who your commander needed you to be for however many years. Now you need to figure out who you are. And in that process, you will find things that scare you. You will find things that absolutely delight and thrill you, and you will find things you need to learn. That's the start of your game plan. Use that to build a career and be flexible, work through it, find people like me and you who can help, and know that it's a process.
Awesome. Before we go, you got the book. Tell us a little bit about it and where can they find one?
So The New Rules of Influence, How to Authentically Build Trust, Drive Change, and Make an Impact, available on Amazon, as we all know, and anywhere books are sold. It's a great book. It's written in a very conversational, easy to read style. It's not an academic book. It was not designed to, but it's really a book for anyone, anywhere who just says, I think I got something to say, or I want to be seen a little bit more. And maybe I've been marginalized or underrepresented. Maybe I just haven't had the courage. This book will give you the tools to speak up and move ahead in more control.
And if a cranky old field artillery officer who once, many years ago, majored in liberal arts can understand it, I'd imagine you can too. And for the folks out there, if you haven't already done so, go to www.recruitmilitary.com, where you will find hundreds of thousands of job opportunities from tens of thousands of employers around the world and around the corner. We at Recruit Military have a mission to help veterans, transitioning service members, and mil spouses find meaningful employment. Employment's my job. You think I could pronounce it? On behalf of Recruit Military and the folks that joined us here today, thank you, Lida, very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Lucas. Thanks to everyone at Recruit Military for supporting this message.
Absolutely. And as we wind down the year and slide into the holiday season, try to remember that thousands of American service members are spending the holidays in foreign lands far from their homes. For those of you who might be watching, who have spent way too many of those holidays away from home, thank you for your service. And for your families who sacrificed in those times, thank you very much for their sacrifice. This has been Lucas Connolly for Recruit Military Live. Until next time, happy holidays.